Hello and welcome to the Weekend Review, part of the Celtic Down Under podcast series. My name's Anthony McGuire, and I'm joined by Paul Massey as we discuss and dissect what was a bit of a glorious game at Parkhead on the weekend, the eve of New Year's Eve. The snow was falling and the place was rocking. Two fantastic goals that saw us win the match 2-1. Don't believe the rhetoric. Paul, how was your long weekend? How was your long weekend?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Happy New Year to you and
Happy
to anyone else that's joining in. It was great. I've been off since the 23rd. Got tomorrow off as well, so don't go back to work until Wednesday. And obviously, a victory to savour to close out the year, although we've still got one important fixture tomorrow to see us into the winter break. But yeah, we were both at the Perth Celtic Supporters Club, along with Sean, who unfortunately can't make it tonight, and a few other people we know, and a crowd of over 300 in there, I believe, which is one of the biggest turnouts in a long time. And as you say, the place was absolutely rocking. I think some of the footage is out on Twitter and started to go viral because it was bonkers. And obviously a few beers had been taken too. So all in all, a thoroughly enjoyable evening. And yeah, the result obviously that we all wanted as well.
Yes, Happy New Year to everybody. A bit of a faux pas, they're not saying at the start of the show. Sean at the tennis tonight, so he unfortunately can't be with us, but he's here in spirit, and he was having a great time on Saturday night as we were taking it all in. Wonderful tunes from Gary Jameson beforehand, just a little bit of I was a wee bit nervous, like from about lunchtime on Saturday. I was just a wee bit tense, and I was like just wanting the ball, just that first kickoff, just wanted the game to start. And we got into Johnny Fox's at the Perth Celtic Sports Club at about an hour and a half before kickoff, and the place was heaving already. So the atmosphere was good, but I was just a little bit anxious and maybe reading a little bit too much into some of the paper talk. And the Rangers are coming. Obviously, Brendan addressed that in his post-match, but we'll come to that a bit later. But Paul, how did you see it coming into the game? Because obviously form lines do kind of go out the window with this fixture to a certain degree. You know, the first 15, 20 minutes is just going to be frenetic, which it was. But, you know, team selection, I don't think there was any real shocks. Obviously, Carter Vickers doesn't make it. But, you know, Brendan Rodgers resisting the urge to go with either Abada or Hatate, both fit enough to make the bench. What were your thoughts? Where was your head at before the game, and just some touch on some points with the team selection?
Yeah, so that's a question you asked me as soon as you caught up a bit later than myself and my mate Dave caught up, and first thing he asked me is, how you feeling about the game? First thing he asked me, how you feeling about the game? And I think people on here know that I'm pretty confident and reasonably positive and optimistic more often than not. And I think as the day wore on, obviously it was an 8:30 p.m. kickoff for us locally in Perth. As the day wore on, and certainly as I had one or two more beers, I got more positive and more optimistic. For me, if you just sort of break it down, yes, there's a lot of hype. Yes, we've had a little wobble. We'd only won those couple of games, but they were important games. And yes, those were much weaker teams than Rangers, and they didn't really try and come out and attack us. But there was enough in those two games to see us playing a bit more positively. Then you look at the fixture. Home advantage is always big in these, and obviously they had, much like we did in the last game, they had no fans. You knew the atmosphere would be white hot. And I think there was enough there for me to go, they're not great shakes, as we saw again. And instead of getting sucked into that kind of spiral of doom that has the propensity to sort of come from the media, and our own fan base, we're very quick to sort of be negative and pull things down. And there's some rationale for that. But really, if you strip all of that noise back, I felt we had the better team, the better players. Really, if you look at it, I think the only one you would swap, you'd take Butland over Hart at the moment, and that's about it. I don't think there's there's anyone else in that team that I'd want for our squad. So I just felt like there's probably enough in it, and we created a lot of chances in the 2 previous games and not quite taken as many as we should have. So we took enough to win the game, and I just sort of hoped and felt it might be a day where that just clicks, and it didn't quite. But 2 great goals to win it, and obviously a worldie from Tavernier, who's got that in his locker, and it was a daft foul, and we've seen him do that to us before, and luckily in the end it was just a consolation, and it's probably made the scoreline look a bit closer than I felt it was. I thought we were the better side for big chunks of the game, and really it was probably our own sort of slackness that gave them, and bit of poor play here and there that gave them the opportunities that did come their way. The only surprise, well, not only surprise, the only thing that I think the lineup was exactly as expected. I didn't think CCV would make it, despite the noises to say that it was precautionary. We've seen this happen a few times now. If he has to come off, he's never back for the next game. It's maybe at least one more. So that wasn't a huge shock. And then obviously we lost Welsh as well, but we'll come on to that in a bit. I think for me, the only question mark was would Brendan Rodgers take the opportunity to play Maeda down the left, because he's got such a good history of keeping Tavernier quiet, or would he be more, I guess, positive and aggressive and let Palmer play his normal position? And he opted for the latter, and I think in the end that was, Palmer proved. I've been a bit critical of Palmer here and there, not because I don't think he's a good player, but I think he's inconsistent, and he's clearly got more in his locker than he's necessarily producing consistently all the time. But I thought he had a very good game, and he never mind Maeda, he did a really good job of keeping Tavernier to defending, rather than like it really is only from set pieces that he became a threat. He didn't really get up the park like they would want him to. So yeah, all in all, kind of as expected, and positive from Rodgers, and yeah, I thought.
Well, I guess part of what you just said there, Paul, was you said that Palmer had quite a good game against Tavernier, and I guess the juxtaposition with that is when Mikey Johnson came on the left near the end of the game, and Tavernier got at least 2 or 3 clear runs down that side, so a couple of switch plays where Mikey Johnson was nowhere near him. He was just ball watching, and Greg Taylor at one point absolutely bollocked him and said, like, "What are you doing? Like, you need to be tracking him. I'm picking up. You've got to pick the fullback up." So it just showed the difference between the job that Palmer was doing. He was obviously tracking his runner quite closely. He was probably told to make sure that he was defensively sound. To be honest, I don't think Rangers had too many opportunities for Tavernier to get on the ball anyway, but there was a difference there that last sort of 10 minutes or 10-15 minutes when the substitutes came on, sort of thing. So that's an interesting point. And I guess the other thing I say to you, I'm pretty sure I say to my dad before the game, is I just hope if Kyogo gets a chance, he takes it. And my goodness, did he take it? I mean, it was basically a half chance. But he had one early. He sort of shot. It was in the first 10 minutes, and he sort of shot wide and got a good position. But it was very you're very unlikely to beat Butland from that sort of angle. But yeah, I mean, obviously, a few people probably shouting for him to pass it to Daizen Maeda, but no, he had other ideas. I guess, as I said at the start of the show, very busy that first 10-15 minutes, quite frenetic, but I kind of felt that the only time Rangers were enjoying that first half is, as you said, was when we gave the ball away. And realistically, every time we got forward, and particularly if we got to the byline, and Alistair Johnson put at least 1 or 2 decent crosses in, same with Palmer on the left, we looked like we were going to score. I mean, obviously Bernardo has the header that goes wide. Maeda unlucky not to latch onto that, but I guess if the header's a little bit more on target, then it's a goal. But obviously Bernardo, having his first goal during the week against Livingston, and that was his third start. You kind of feel that he's grown out of that jersey, and he's just starting to show some of the the talent and ability that obviously, he has, but, obviously we've seen it in flashes so far, but that was quite a big performance for him on Saturday, and obviously to cap it off with a goal. What did you think? What did you make of it? And when talk us through the goal, was the first goal as well, because that was on the 25-minute mark.
Yeah, I think, well, you're right, spot on, that Bernardo had a really good game, but so the whole midfield did. So that engine room of Carl anchoring and Bernardo and O'Reilly. I think Bernardo gives you real nice balance. He's very industrious, but he's really technical. He doesn't give the ball away very often. He's not as I guess, doesn't look as creative as somebody like Matt O'Reilly, or even Armoy or Rio, but there's a reason why he's been picked in the Champions League, because of his engine, his passing ability. He's got a bit of dig. We saw a bit of that as well. And he's still a young player, and I just feel like he's kind of growing in, like to your point, he's growing into the jersey a little bit. So, some players do take time to find their feet, particularly when they're joining. They're expected to be stepping up and starting. He should have scored with a header. I think he it's a really good chance he should score. But he takes his goal really well. Like as you said, we were building a bit of pressure and momentum. We'd had a few corners by that point, and it's a pretty good delivery. I was bemoaning Palmer's delivery in previous games, but he gets sort of better sort of quality delivery in, and it's sort of a poor defensive clearance.
Yeah.
But Bernardo again shows his technique, and he gets over the ball, and he absolutely buries it. It's a great strike, because it'd be really easy to snatch at that, especially when he's just missed one. So yeah, I thought he had a really accomplished performance. Obviously he got taken off, but I think that was probably for his own good. The yellow cards had started to rack up. Obviously they got a deserved red card. Balogun has a nightmare there. He miscontrols it. But kind of to echo Brendan Rodgers' comments, we never really kicked on from that point. We were already pretty dominant in the game, and we're 2-0 up. At that point, we should strangle the life out of the game and sort of probably score another and see it out quite comfortably. And I don't know if psychologically we maybe just kind of assumed that we'd done enough by that point, and we dropped off a little bit. To your point, we brought on the subs shortly thereafter. I think the sending off 71 minutes, and I think the subs are about 75 to 80, something like that.
Something like that. Yep.
So it's sort of quite disruptive at that point.
83, but then there was still 10 minutes of injury time after that.
Yeah, so we played it. I think we played 101 minutes in the end.
Yeah.
So there was plenty of time. And yeah, we just a bit disappointing at that period. We didn't really kind of grab the game by the scruff of the neck and either just close it out 2-0 or even score another. But yeah, generally, I thought we bossed the first half, to be honest. They had a couple of half chances on the counter, as you said, from mainly mistakes. I think there's a really slack pass by Arthur Johnston, which Dessers latches on to, and bang for buck, he's got to be one of the worst players they've ever signed. He sort of meanders his way into the box and never makes a decision. And fair play to AJ, he rectifies his own mistake and get back. But even a half competent striker should be at least getting a shot away and probably scoring.
Kenny Miller was apoplectic with that one. He's like, he's like, slowed up. Like, what's he doing? He's right over a shot. He's taking too many touches, and it's like, two strikers, Kevin and Chris Sutton, absolutely giving them absolute pelters for pretty much the whole match after that point. But I must admit, you think, this guy must be a bit of a player. He's been scoring goals for Rangers, but all he'd seem to do was just wag the finger. That was his telltale move pretty much for most of the match. But yeah, I must admit that was for chances, that one, and then the other one was the one where Liam Stales plays the pass out wide and gets intercepted. And was it McLaughlin, the young lad for them, McCausland? I actually thought he was one of the better players. At least
he was the best. He was probably the best player on the day.
He was pretty direct, and he was trying, sort of thing. He didn't really give up, and he had probably could have done a wee bit better with his chance as well. But both those chances come from our sloppy passes. And then you've got Monster Munch, Chris Boyd at halftime saying, "Oh, we're creating all these chances." It's like, you're only getting chances because we're coughing up possession. And this is the thing, is there's obviously still room for improvement in our game. And you eliminate some of those passing errors, then they don't get those chances. Then they're resorting to long balls, humping up the park and hoping that Dessers is trying to get a flick on or get it down.
Well,
and you have to say,
that's where their other decent chance came from. Just a hump up the park from Butland. Greg Taylor falls asleep, and McCausland gets the run on him, and he comes in and Hart bails us out there with a really good save, and then we clear it up from behind. But Hart gets a really strong hand in it. So Hart, like, there was no saves that you'd think like he shouldn't be making, but again, he's done his job. You could argue he could do better at the free kick, but even that I think is a little bit churlish. It's a cracking strike.
He's hit it fast. He's hit it hard.
He gets a hand to it, but he can't quite keep it out. And yeah, maybe if he's a bit younger and more mobile, maybe he gets a bit across a bit quicker. But I think it's harsh, and I've seen some people sort of giving him a bit of heat for that across social media. But I think it's a bit harsh. I think it's a really good strike. And he does set up relatively middle. That's his wall side, but he's not right over the other side. So he's kind of hedged his bets a bit, but it's too good a strike. And you kind of just got to accept it. Sometimes that's too good for the keeper to keep out. But I don't think they created that much that wasn't from sort of slackness or errors on our part.
As much as our midfield bossed it, and Cal McGregor, I mean, we may as well talk about him now. Like, that was probably, you maybe say that's his best game this season, near enough up to top. So. Like, he was absolutely dominant, and he was dominant at Ibrox when we played them earlier in the season as well. And if you're thinking Philip Clements like some sort of tactical mastermind, you think maybe to have some sort of plan to try and nullify Callum McGregor, but he didn't. So their midfield three was that's Sterling, Cantwell, and the other guy, this crew cut. Never remember his name. Lundstrom. And we just ran riot. I mean, our midfield was so dominant. And I was watching Cantwell, and I obviously not so much when I had 3 or 4 beers in me at the Celtic Club, but when I watched it back today, just for a wee refresher, Cantwell cheated massively. Like, he just was, he was sort of like pretending to chase Callum McGregor. So I think a couple of times where he got close to him, but a lot of the times he was 10 yards away, and he's supposed to be the guy that's supposed to be putting pressure on him. It's just like, well, tactically, they got that completely wrong, and good for us, but he got shown up massively, I think. And even when he got the ball, pretty much McGregor was up his arse the minute he got the ball, and all he could do was pass it backwards. I think I could count on one hand the number of times he actually passed the ball in a forward position. He had one weak shot that Joe Hart saves. And that for me was like, well, that was the battle to be won, was the midfield. And like I say, that's the midfield, our midfield three. Like, even a bloody nose from getting a backhand to Matt O'Reilly was enough to stop him. And it was only a yellow card for Bernardo that took him off. Otherwise, he'd have probably stayed on as well, because we definitely dropped off when Turnbull replaced him. And Rodgers said as much in the post-match. But for me, that if you win that midfield battle, then it just makes the rest of the game so much easier. And we just seem more coherent. Like, our defense flowed into our midfield, flowed into our forward players so smoothly. When you compare it to them, and it just seemed like they were like really like separate and fragmented. And that for me was like, that was the key difference. And, Butland's got his 2 centre halves either side and taking a goal kick, and he's just humping it every time. He's not even trying to play it out from the back, because they were just obviously not used to that amount of pressure. So I really think that, as you say, that first half, we went in 1-0, and I'm thinking, I'm expecting more in the second half. We didn't have to wait too long. 2 minutes out of the second half. And obviously, we should touch on before we get to the goal. We'll come back to that in a second. But what did you make of the Rothste's introduction? Because obviously, Stephen Welsh, possibly, we suspect it's dislocated shoulder. So it did pop out, and he had to unfortunately come off. Thought he was playing pretty well up until that point. I don't think Stephen Welsh ever really disappoints in a Celtic jersey. Like, he just gives you, he falls out of that Ralston mold where he just gives you 110%. He's played in that Glasgow Derby fixture before. He's come in at short notice to fill in, and I feel he's always done a job. So yeah, and then obviously Naroski completely out of the cold, hasn't kicked the ball since Kilmarnock early in the season, the League Cup defeat. How did you see that one?
Well, it was nice to see him back in the squad, I guess, first and foremost, which probably only comes due to injury. And Rodgers' post-match comments sort of seemed to indicate that he would have been used more often, but he's had some niggles coming back from injury, which hasn't really been shared in any like press conferences or any snippets. We haven't really heard that he had been sort of slowly struggling, but it sort of makes sense. He was really good when he came on. Aside from his error for the free kick, he gets too tight and he gets rolled, and he has a tug of the jersey, and but being fair to him, he probably thinks, well, corner of the 18-yard box, we should be able to keep it out from there. And obviously, as we say, it's a worldie. But other than that, I think it was about 31 minutes when Welsh gets injured. Probably takes a few minutes to get him off because he got a fair amount of treatment before he finally left the pitch. Shame for him, obviously, gets a chance filling in for Cameron Carter-Vickers, and probably would be expecting to play in the next game against St Mirren, because we now know that CCV's out until post the winter break, and then tough luck on him, he gets injured as well. But sometimes you need these injuries to happen for somebody to get an opportunity again, and we've seen that with some other players that have got their opportunity from somebody else's misfortune. And I thought Navrosky had a really good game aside from the yellow and the foul. He was solid defensively, but the thing that impressed me the most, and this leads nicely into the goal, which is presumably why you asked me, is his passing out of defense was significantly better than we've seen from anyone else who's played, with the possible exception of Cameron Carter-Vickers. But he because he's the one that does often make the sort of vertical passing, but quite a few times he played a more kind of a less Rodgers style pass, probably a more Ange Postecoglou style pass, a bit more risky, taking out multiple players, but that's how you get beyond tightly packed defenses. And it's his ball, cuts about 3 or 4 Rangers players out to get it into O'Reilly. O'Reilly's then under pressure, and he shrugs off his man, and he plays another really good pass. But 2 passes, and you've gone from halfway to the edge of the box, and you've taken out half their team. And then from there, Kyogo is just, he looks back to the player he was last season, and even right at the beginning of this season. He's composed, he takes his time, he rolls his man, he rejects the opportunity to make a more straightforward pass. And yeah, I did see that comment earlier, and it's spot on. We get the service in quickly, the wee man will deliver, and it was a great strike. It's a worldie as well. The keeper, I think he gets a little bit on it, but you're not going to save that. And I don't think there'd be anyone that was critical of the goalkeeper in that situation. But yeah, Navrosky really impressive, solid defensively, but more importantly, his distribution was great, and it was more than once during that second half, particularly, where he was willing to play that forward pass through the lines, and get the ball more forward more quickly, and that allowed us to create chances.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely that pass into O'Reilly was good. O'Reilly was able to shrug off Balogun, and then Connor Golson gets wrong-footed from Kyoto. He sort of sends a wee bit of a dummy, and it just shows from Celtic, both goals, when you've got a little bit of space, we can be deadly. And it's just, obviously, in Scotland, we tend to come up against tightly packed defences and teams that just don't give you any space, and it's just, they're just like so many bodies between you and the goal, and make it really, really hard. But when we are actually playing against a team that are actually trying to attack us and it's open, we have got the weaponry and the artillery to put teams to the sword, sort of thing. And I mean, that's as good a goal as you'll see in the English Premier League or La Liga or any league in the world. I mean, it's as Chris Sutton said at the end of the game, it was a good advert for Scottish football, because the goals were world class. I mean, that free kick, nothing to sneeze at there either. Give credit where it's due. It's a consolation, yeah, but But they were all good goals, well hit, well struck. So at 2-0, as you say, you're expecting that they're going to have to get a wee bit desperate and start, throw more bodies forward if they're getting out of the game. I'm thinking, well, it could open up even more, and maybe we'll see the introduction of, Rio Atati and Lila Bada. Obviously, Lila Bada does end up getting on in the 83rd minute to absolute thunderous applause from the Celtic supporters, which was really nice to see. So that was great. But yeah, I guess the change with Turnbull coming on, I kind of felt that we lost a little bit of that industry, as you probably referred to it earlier with Bernardo. I guess his penalty shout at the time, I'm like, how's that not a penalty? But on watching it back, I kind of felt he did go down very, very easily. There was minimal contact. I mean, there was a hand on the back, but I'd be pretty upset if that had been given against us. It wasn't offside, which, the linesman, I don't know where he got that decision from, but for me, I couldn't see VR turn that around and saying, oh yeah, that's definitely a penalty. I was one of those ones that was a bit touch and go. And I know we haven't touched on the other so-called controversy. We'll come to that in a little bit. But what did you make of that? And then, yeah, what was your thoughts on that one, Paul? Anything at the time? Or?
I guess, well, yeah, on Turnbull, that was really quite late in the game. It was already in injury time, so we'd had quite a lot of beers by that point, so I can't really remember what we thought of it at the time. And so, because the flag went up, I think we just all, and I don't remember seeing much of a replay. So
yeah,
I think the flag went up and we just assumed I was offside anyway. So there's no point really dwelling on the challenge. The thing I would say is, if that's an elsewhere on the pitch, it's a foul. It doesn't have to be, a huge amount of contact. There's a push in the back. He feels it and he goes down. That's the modern game. That's a modern game. That's they're given more often than not. I don't think he's offside. I'd certainly expect to see, and we've not seen any lines on VAR to say whether he was or he wasn't. But yeah, you kind of think, well, it was kind of just brushed aside based on the offside. And to me, why has the linesman got his flag up for something that tight straight away?
Yeah.
Anyway, he's supposed to let the play continue, and then if he's off, if something happens and an outcome happens, then VAR will go back and check it. So I think he's jumped the gun anyway. So there's probably a criticism there. You're right. It's probably a reasonably soft one, and if the ref doesn't give it live, if he's seen it, then you'd probably be hard pushed to overturn it. I thought Turnbull was pretty much typical of what he always is. One-paced, not like our press was really good until he came on. They couldn't live with our press, particularly first half. And that's one of the reasons why they didn't actually create very much and had to resort to just pumping it long, because they couldn't pass through us. And yeah, I think Turnbull, he doesn't have that intensity. He doesn't have that urgency. And generally, he is a downgrade when he comes on. So it wasn't a huge surprise that that's what happened, but disappointing given where we were in the game, and we should have been trying to just, close it out. And I think if we got the penalty and convert it, which we might not have, Palmer would have been off the pitch, and so who knows who'd have been taking it.
But David Turnbull probably.
Well, yeah, that's true actually, and he's not bad at penalties, right? So that would have taken it to 3-0 and 3-1, and that's, I think it was just it was 2 or 3 minutes after they'd scored. So that would probably been a fairer reflection, I think, on the balance of play. But as it was, we saw the game out reasonably comfortably. As always, at the time, I think we were all quite stressed, because you just fear the worst when there's only one goal in it. But much like you, I watched the game back yesterday, and in actual fact, they create nothing after the goal. They create zero. There's a few things thrown into the box, but nothing there's not a single clear-cut chance.
There was one where if they'd played the ball with the back stick, maybe Tavernier might have got on the end of it, but they chose to shoot instead or something like that. But it was, but like I said, I didn't feel that they created. They're basically a team that humps the ball up. They're looking for free kicks and penalties around the box, in the box, and then they're relying on Tavernier and Barisic. Or he wasn't playing, obviously, but whoever the Yeomans, whoever the free kick specialists are, to try and score them goals, and try to win, corners and things like that. But I even felt like set piece wise, corners and free kicks, Kilder got on the end about 4 of them. He cleared.
He had 3 clearing headers in the first half alone.
I'm pretty sure he had one in the second half as well.
Yeah, so they weren't well directed. The corners were actually, the delivery was pretty poor. They have got a bigger team, like physically a bigger guys than we have, and they didn't really take that advantage at all. I thought we defended, pretty comfortably from set pieces, which it's not something that comes out of my mouth that often. But yeah, we've seen
we looked comfortable. I mean, I didn't feel like we're under the cosh at any point. Sometimes you have games where you have 2 or 3 corners in a row and you're heading it clear and it's another corner and it builds a little bit of pressure. They never had that. Like
there's been a couple of games at Ibrox, I think, when last season when Starfelt was pretty much, he was dominant and won everything, but we were kind of under siege for periods in those games. But you're right, they never really. I think their first corner of the match was like the 40th minute or something, and it's Nawrocki gets across and makes a really good tackle, and that leads to a corner for them, and that's the first corner of the whole game. And then I think they probably did get a few more second half, but to your point that they didn't really. I'm just trying to pull the stats up at the same time. They didn't really make it the most of that. So yeah, they had 2 corners, so they must have had another one in the one in the second half and one in the first half. We only had 4 in the end, actually, but I'd rather score 1 goal from a corner out of 4 than score nothing from 23 or whatever.
20 goals.
20 it was against Dundee. But yeah, I thought we were relatively dominant and well worth the win.
Yeah, I guess just to change tack a little bit, we may as well talk about some of the refereeing decisions in the game. May as well get that off our chests and just see what we both think. So, a few incidents, I'll run through the ones that spring to mind, and then by all means you can chime in. So obviously we got the Alistair Johnson handball, which I was actually in the toilet when this happened, so I sort of missed a bit of it. I sort of came out and saw that it was offside. I'm sort of going, well, what's everybody so thinking about? But at the time, obviously, it was a few replays, and I was queued up for a pee, so I didn't quite see that at the time, but obviously watched it back today. So there's obviously that decision, and obviously the so-called controversy around that, which Sky seemed to latch onto. You had the backhand from, I think it was Sterling, that caught Matt O'Reilly, which on first glance looked to me, obviously it was just innocent and whatever, but when you actually slow it down just a little bit, I know when you slow things down it looks worse, but it's kind of not a natural hand action. Like the way he was moving, his arms like out here somewhere, and it's like that's not a natural action. He's taking a wee swing at him there. Then you've got Alistair Johnson probably doing something not dissimilar when he went up for a header. And again, that's a little bit more natural because he's sort of jumping up, but could be deemed to be lucky. You've got the Paolo Bernardo one where he's come in on Connor Golson, but if you actually reverse the angle, Connor Golson's the one who probably should have been booked because that was a pretty horrible tackle, but he made it look, then he's rolling around on the floor making it look like Bernardo got him in the tangled legs, and Bernardo was obviously on a yellow card at that point. So that was another one which on another day could have went differently. The Balogun red card, well, I think that's as clear as day, and I think you're not really anybody arguing the toss on that one. So I think for me, they were the ones that sort of cropped up when I rewatched it today. Was there any other ones, Paul, that you can think of that sort of...
Not in terms of big decisions. I think it's the best time to air this is when you win. I think there was a lot of little weird decisions, as there often is by Scottish referees. The little stuff that, either you let the game flow when there isn't really an advantage and a free kick is more useful to you, or you give a foul when you should have given a light advantage, or even just the little 50-50s, and somehow they sort of go the way you don't expect them to go. I think there's a little bit of that, like little things breaking up the game, breaking up the flow, which is quite often we quite often see that. We'd like to try and play on the front foot and keep the ball zipping about, and if it's just small and indiscretions that get pulled up when you could probably let them go, then that definitely slows the play down. So there's a wee bit of that, which was sort of frustrating, as it often is. But on the big decisions, yeah, the main narrative coming out of Mordor
always
is,
cheated, never defeated.
Yeah, well, they've done some mental gymnastics, both their manager and their sort of podcast community and social media community have done some mental gymnastics to get them to that should have been a penalty regardless of the offside, which to me is utterly bonkers. Now, they've convinced themselves that because Willie Collum hasn't overturned the penalty decision, and that it should have been an offside restart as opposed to a goal kick restart. But I retweeted this earlier. There's a lengthy Bobby Madden post. Again, Bobby Madden cleared up the Lagerbielke stuff in the last game, and despite being a former season ticket holder at their place, he clears it up again. And he basically says that the VAR guys would do all those checks in the background. So because and the meltdown seems to have come from the fact it was a long time later before Sky actually, put their pictures up to show that the VAR lines that there were two of them offside. But I think that's probably a media sharing issue between the VAR team and the broadcaster. The VAR team have obviously got access to that immediately. And Madden says basically all of that would be checked at the time. But first and foremost, if the ref doesn't think it's a handball and the VAR doesn't think it's a clear and obvious error, now I would probably argue the toss on that. I would probably say, because I think there was some commentary came out that he felt that his arm was not in an unnatural position. And when they showed the replays, it seemed like they were checking two things, because the first time the ball comes in, it's sort of he pulls his arm away and they think, oh, is it hit him up high here? Doesn't hit him at all, but then it bounces, and as it bounces and he moves towards the defender, he sort of scoops it out of play with his forearm. So I think you would probably say that the second one is could warrant a penalty, but ultimately they will have checked that for the offside as part of all of that. And yeah, that's enough to throw out. But to me, it doesn't really matter because ultimately the right decision was arrived at. So
well, there's two things. One, yes, they're offside, and I guess where Sky are getting a bit shirty is the fact that apparently they can hear what Willie Collum's saying. Apparently, so they've got the inner line to VAR. And obviously, at no point was it verbalized, apparently, that it was offside. So this is where the so-called conspiracy theories come from. So obviously, the argument is, they realized after the fact that it's offside and they put that up. But ultimately, like you say, right decision being arrived at. And then the next thing is, you've got some daft Rangers fans online with the still image going, oh, that image is taken too soon. The ball's not left his foot, but they're actually coming from an offside position,
a more offside position.
So that it would actually be worse if they, so it's just like you just laugh, you sit there laughing, just going like, what a hill to die on. But they're a silly bunch at the best of times, so they're just living up to their reputation. But I must admit, like I listened to Philip Clement's post-match today, and for someone who didn't want to dwell on refereeing decisions, he seemed to spend about 4 of his 6 minutes talking about how he should have got a penalty. And then if you want an even bigger laugh, you should watch his interview with Carradine thingy from BBC, who asked him if the better team won, and he says, "Oh, are you looking for a reaction? What do you think? Did the better team win?" And I felt the same. Well, you just given him his reaction that he was after.
I was going to say, for a guy who's been lauded as the new savior, as they always do, they're not.
The Rangers are coming.
They're not shy to have another false prophet arrive. Yeah, for a guy who's supposed to be, unflappable and, got them going in the right direction, he was pretty easily rattled. One defeat with a decision that is, clearly the right one. It didn't take much to rattle his cage. So it'd be
a yellow
interesting to
card
see.
on the bench as well. Just from
It'd be interesting to see how things go from there. But yeah, on the other ones you mentioned, I think they probably, I get what you're saying about the little, maybe it's an intentional move, but I think they probably even themselves out. I think they're both they would have been both soft if they were to be Reds. So I'm not too concerned with either of those. The Bernardo one, he does and you just slow that down. He catches him on the Achilles. But you're right, Goldson's thrown himself in a ridiculous sort of tackle as well. But on another day, you could easily see that given. I think we're, and that's the other thing that their lot are bemoaning, is that we should be down to 8. I've seen 9 or 8 so we should have had 2 or 3 red cards according to their lot. But obviously you take that with a pinch of salt. But I think what's happened is he's let a bit go early on. And once you do that, you've got to be relatively consistent. And so and he's obviously done that with the intent to try and keep 11 players on the pitch on each side. He hasn't got a choice on the Balogun one. It's as clear a red card as you'll see. Mayer is in, especially at his gas. There's no cover whatsoever. He'd be in on Butland.
They should probably let him go.
Well, yeah. Well, yeah. On his current form,
he's crossed 5 minutes before that. He put it in Rose Z.
Exactly. So but he just as easily score a worldie, right? That's the problem with him. He's completely inconsistent as well. But yeah, it's all of Balogun's own making. Connor Goldson plays a reasonably simple pass to him, and his first touch is shocking. Kyogo's on him, as he was kind of all day. His work rate was great as usual, and he just slips it in behind him. Mayor's away, and he's had a couple of cracks at him and a bit of a wrestle. And then obviously Mayor's gone down, but I don't think there's any debate whatsoever about that. And Nick Walsh is in his, in fairness, he's right behind the incident. And it doesn't take long to make up his mind. He's racing up behind, and the car's barely, it's barely stopped running before it turns backside and up.
If you thought the cheer for Kyogo's goal was loud at the Celtic club, well, that red card was just that was the sealer. That was oh, here we go. Balogun walking off the ground down the tunnel, he did appear to possibly spit at some of the Celtic supporters. Interestingly, there's not been much made of that, and it hasn't really been sort of brought up with any sort of disciplinary things or anything like that yet. So I don't know whether maybe
they'll all be on holiday, right? So
presumably tomorrow, maybe.
The earliest somebody will get to that is tomorrow, maybe if the game's back on. So they might.
But it's not a good look.
No, and it was an odd decision to bring him back anyway. It was sort of a bit of desperation. It shows you how weak they are defensively when he's keeping John Suter out of the team. But yeah, I've not watched it. I've seen some noise on it about on social media, but I haven't actually seen the video. But if he's done that, then he needs absolutely hammered, and you would sort of expect, well, maybe not with them lot, but you would hope that that would be that might be the end of the road for him. That's it's pretty much it's unforgivable and pretty disgusting. So, but we'll wait and see. Like I say, it probably won't get picked up until tomorrow, so he'll be available to play.
The other interesting thing,
he'll be suspended, so he'll be out of that game. But
Golson's suspended as well. He picked up a yellow card, so he'll miss the Hibs game in the new year apparently, because he picked up his sixth booking. I only noticed that today when I was watching it back. And another interesting thing with Clement was that they went down to 10 men. They're 2-0 down, and he takes off Lundstrom and puts on John Suter as a centre-half. So you're taking off an attacking player, put a defensive player on. So is his mindset at that point damage limitation? Like he's worried he's going to get scalped? I mean, ultimately they get a goal back, but that's not because of formation. That's just like a daft tackle at the edge of the box that led to a free kick. But it just seemed a bit odd to me. It's like, well, are you going for you going for it or are you not? Like, it seemed a bit of a head scratcher to me. Like, I'm sort of thinking, well, surely you put an attacking player on or gamble and take a fullback off and put, do something. But yeah, it seemed a bit.
I think he dropped Lundstrom in to play centre back, so he'd moved the loss of a player higher up the pitch. You can argue the rights and wrongs of that. If you try and push your fullbacks forward, you probably need two defenders, and whether that's a centre midfielder and a centre back. But I think he'd effectively dropped Lundstrom in to play centre back next to him. So he's obviously going, well, I'd rather have an actual centre back in there. I didn't take, as I said, it was reasonably well oiled, so I didn't take that much note of how he tried to rejig it and where they lost, the eventual body from. I kind of get the impression that they just tightened up and try to fill up the midfield. And obviously there's an element of you don't want to then. It would be really easy going to 10 men and that's what I felt, and we all felt. That's why we were so upbeat. Is you'd expect us to then make that extra man advantage count, and we didn't. And that was a bit of a disappointment. Obviously, the only thing that really matters is the result. But Rodgers' post-match comments as well, that's the one thing that he was disappointed in as well, is like, we never really
saw out.
Yeah, like, we nursed it through, but we didn't really take advantage of that extra man. You wouldn't, and for chunks of that last, whatever it was, half an hour, I guess, because we went to 100 odd minutes. You wouldn't have known we had the extra man.
Yeah.
And that's somewhat to their credit, but it's also a pretty damning indictment on the players we had on. And I think some of that comes from, obviously, we know that there's not enough depth in the squad, and players needed to either be replaced from a fitness and injury point of view or from a potential second booking point of view. So,
well, we've got confirmation of who's off to the Asian Cup. So that's come through. Yeah. So we've got Mark Rutilio, who hasn't really featured. So that's not really much of a loss at this point. Obviously, Big O and Yang for South Korea. And it's been confirmed that Ryo Hatate and Daisen Maeda have made the Japan squads. Kyogo, surprisingly or unsurprisingly, probably the Japanese manager just doesn't fancy him. Basically, that's what I put it down to. He's just he prefers Maeda in that position than Kyogo, and it's international managers have their favourites. I'm thankful that Kyogo's going to be with us when we come back from the winter break. But we're going to be down. What's that? A centre forward and 3 wingers. So we've got a wee gaping hole there. I mean, obviously Abada it's just come back. So I mean, that's nice. But we're probably short. So I mean, would you be considering a loan for a wide player, or I think we probably need to bring in another striker, which we've talked on and off about for the last few months. But now that we know, you potentially got up to 4 games there at least where you're not going to have any of those players.
Well, I guess the first thing is it's great for the players that were selected. They'll all be delighted, and Kyogo will be gutted that he's not been selected, but he may not be completely surprised, to your point, given how he's been treated previously. Now we know that the Japanese have got some good players, especially in the front section of the pitch, but you must have a pretty awesome talent pool if you can leave a player of Kyogo's ability at home. But yeah, it's a massive bonus for us. I think if he'd been selected and we thought would be selected, then we would have almost certainly gone out and bought a striker, and maybe even loaned an extra one as well, so you had some coverage. Because at the end of the day, there are 2 strikers. We haven't really got a third. It's probably Maeda filling in. So on that basis, it's probably less of a requirement to buy another striker, because unless you can get one, because January is notoriously difficult to get good talent in, and you quite often have to pay over the odds. I think if they'd both gone, we'd have had to pay over the odds for somebody, whether that's somebody local or somebody further afield. I always fancied us for a loan, probably somebody quite experienced, probably somebody not quite getting a game week in, week out. And it's a relatively short-term solution because you probably it isn't going to be somebody that you would end up keeping for good. But if that's somebody that can guarantee you goals and slot straight into the team and be able to be rotated with Kyogo, and or the worst happens and he gets injured, you've got a ready-made sort of replacement. And I think that's unless we can get a preferred candidate that's available and for budget we're happy with, I think we'll probably end up with a lone striker now that Kyogo's going to be staying. I think Hatate is a big miss. I thought he might actually
miss out,
given how long he's been out. I genuinely thought he probably wouldn't get selected because he's literally going to have played no football, unless he plays on tomorrow night. In which case he might play part. I wouldn't imagine he'll start, so he might get some minutes tomorrow. So it's disappointing from the side of things that we thought we were going to get him back, and I didn't think he'd be selected. If you were trying to put a positive spin on it, well, we haven't really had him for weeks anyway, so we have got a solid, and Bernardo's coming on to a game, so it impacts the depth again. But we can probably get through in the midfield positions until he's back. Wing is an issue because we're into, the Mikey Johnsons of the world again.
Mikey Johnson and James Forrest.
So I think we probably need to go and do something there, which sounds ridiculous given how many wingers we've bought over the last little while. And again, that could be a loan, or if we get somebody, if there's somebody available that was perfect, then we might see something permanent. But there, to me, you definitely need to address striker and wing. Might be short term, and then obviously you hope that they're looking at least a left back
and a goalkeeper.
Yeah, like I flip flop on goalkeeper. We definitely need a new one for next season, and obviously, Hart's got plenty of detractors. He's good enough for what we've got left. It's just a case of if he gets injured, we're stuck with Scott Bain, which is generally quite terrifying. I think we need two goalkeepers, to be honest. I think we need a first pick and we need a backup, because I'd happily let Bain drop back to being third, because he's hardly ever going to actually need to be called upon. But Siegrist is, he's been checked out for an age. He wants to come down here. His missus in Sydney. So I expect him to go at some point, if not this window, then certainly in the summer. So I think we need two goalkeepers.
My preference is just to try and get one this window so that they've got 6 months to
bed in.
So you're not starting the new season where I try to find a new goalkeeper, because I reckon Joe Hart will retire at the end of the season. I've just got a feeling.
Yeah, he might retire. There's talk of him wanting to go back to Shrewsbury where he started his career. He's a local lad. He could also go to the States and cruise it over there for another year or two and make more money if he's got any interest in doing a retirement gig. But equally, he could retire with a really good career under his belt at the end of the season. I'd like him to be kept around the place just for his experience, not necessarily on a playing side of things. But whether I think he's probably, I think his family's probably still elsewhere. I don't know that for sure, but I think in an ideal world you'd get a goalkeeper now. In an ideal world, we got a goalkeeper last summer, but it didn't happen. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Like I think it was a little bit concerning when Roger said the other day, "There's nobody imminent in the pipeline," which is not what you really want to hear when we know how many we probably need in. And
unless he's,
Oh well, yeah, that's obviously you can barely accept anything that comes out of his mouth these days, right? So he loves all the flip-flopping or mind games or however you want to call it. But yeah, I just hope we've got some business done early, and that those players are ready to slot in for the, ideally the Bucky Thistle game, because then you can bed new players in a game that's, let's be honest, we should win that at a canter. So it'd be good to get new players on the pitch and get them kind of settled in a bit before the real stuff starts again.
All right, we're coming up to our hour. So just before we do our man of the matches, which I think is going to be unanimous, anything else from the match that we didn't cover before, Paul, that you want to just touch on before we wrap up?
I probably just that as it was as good a team performance as we've had for some time. There were the odd mistake here and there, but most players, certainly the starting 11, put a really good shift in. And some of the players that are have maybe been slightly off form are starting to look closer to. I still think Alistair Johnston's got a bit to go to get back to the levels that he was at. But he had a better game than he has had. It's probably fair to say, like, when we were talking about left back, Greg Taylor had another really good game. Like, he was up against their best player. Yes, he fell asleep a bit, but he was allowed to step into midfield, and that's another reason why we dominated the midfield. I talk about the midfield 3, but he was effectively a midfield 4. And again, his movement and passing was really good. But yeah, no real failures on the day. And yeah, as comfortable a win as you're probably likely to see without, running away with it. And going yourself spot on. Naroshki grew into the game, and I thought he played really well. And I'm now quite excited to see him play tomorrow. And he certainly showed a bit more about why he was signed. And I'm hopeful that he can kick on after the break, and maybe we can build a new partnership. Because while Scales has filled in admirably, as we've touched on plenty of times, if we want to step up to the next level, I don't think he's quite got it.
The cinch moment of the week before we come to man of the match, the Arbroath substitute goalkeeper coming on as a striker against Wraith Rovers. They were 2-0 down. He scores an absolute worldie from fucking 40 yards out. It's just on a plastic surface. It's just set up for him. He just spanked it. Check it out on Twitter. It's just something else. And they ended up drawing the game 2-2, I think. So, it was an inspired substitution, that one. So that's our cinch moment of the week. I was like, but shout out to Brendan Rodgers for calling out the media after the match. I thought that was just quite refreshing, and it was a wee bit of an Ange moment in his own way. But I've seen off 5 managers. Rangers are coming all the time, and if I listen to the media, so again, very good press conference sound bites from the manager there. Paul, let's just do this. We'll do it on a count of 3. Who our man of the match is? I think we know who it's going to be. 1, 2, 3. Callum
McGregor. Not rehearsed, but
no. I think that was unanimous. So I think, as much Kyoto's for an absolute brilliant goal, and Bernard had a really great performance as well. I think he just everything. The heartbeat of the team on the weekend was all through him, and for the full 101 minutes or whatever it ended up being, he was bossing it, and he made them look pretty ordinary, particularly in that midfield. So I think, especially since you could say he's maybe not had the season, maybe he's not had the absolute heights every week that you'd expect from him, but he definitely pulled out the performance that we needed on the weekend. So as Big Dom says, Captain Fantastic. Thank you everyone for getting in the comments. I really appreciate it. We're trying to get back on a live schedule, so glad that you can join us and revel with us. Northampton Tim there. Happy New Year. Yep, Happy New Year to you too, mate. All the best for 2024. I watched a movie today called Saltburn, not for the easily offended. You just have to watch it. I can't say anything more than that. It's on Amazon Prime if you get access to that. Barry Keoghan puts on quite an interesting performance. Rosamund Pike's in it as well. She's brilliant. But you just have to watch it. And like I said, if you're easily offended, please don't watch it. Paul, what's your musical recommendation if you've got one for us?
I was just sort of throwing this together. Somebody I've stumbled upon literally today, and I haven't heard her solo stuff yet, but I imagine it's going to be good because she's previously in a band called Slow Club, which is like a duo. Her and so she's Rebecca Lucy Taylor, now known solo as Self Esteem, a girl from Rotherham. But her work in Slow Club was excellent, and it seems like since she's moved solo, she's gone up a notch, because I've seen her on 2 different things that we've watched today. So I would imagine she's on my list to check out in the next few days. So yeah, go back and listen to Slow Club if you haven't already. If you're not aware of them, sort of indie duo from probably, I don't know, 7, 8, 10 years ago. And now she's got her some solo material under the stage name Self-Esteem. Yeah, check it out, see what you think.
Fantastic. Thank you, Paul, for joining me today. I know you battled a wee bit of a hangover today, so thank you for pushing through. I mean, we didn't want to miss this opportunity. We might be off there for a few weeks, obviously, with the Celtic going on hiatus after the trip, or after we play St Mirren tomorrow night. So it might be a few weeks before we're back on the airwaves. Stay safe. Enjoy the new year. Stay nice and warm in Scotland, because it looked absolutely Baltic. The guys that were walking to the ground, we saw some videos, some footage. It was very, very cold. It's like 36 degrees here, so I can't even imagine what it's like for you guys. Obviously, if you don't follow us on all the social media channels, everything's down there. We're on Twitter. If you want to sort of see what we share and what we like, we'll have a bit of a laugh, try and keep it nice and light and breezy. So I think all that is left to say, Paul, is hail, hail.
Hail, hail.